Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 395. Just a little bit of stuff going on this week in the world of Wisconsin sports. So we'll talk about the Brewers. I think Brewers will be second up, but we'll talk about the Brewers. They win another series. The Cubs lost a few games. They lost a series. So right now, as we are rounding the corner to September, a 7-game lead in the NL Central and a 3-game lead on the Dodgers. The other big topic this week was Pat Murphy benching 22-year-old Cooper Pratt for a perceived lack of hustle on Tuesday. We're going to break that down. When you look back at it, I don't know. I think Murphy was maybe looking for an excuse to make an example out of somebody, get the team's attention, and Cooper Pratt, with a couple of misplays in that game, gave him that opportunity, and I'm never going to second-guess Murphy. The best thing he does is set the tone, boys, and set the culture for the team. So I think he was looking for an avenue to send a late-season message to wake this team up a bit in the dog days of summer. We're going to break that down and the series. And the Miz last night got another win. ERA is still well sub-2, even though 6 innings of 2-run ball. I mean, kind of a letdown from the Miz. We'll talk all about that. And the pitching mound last night in New York was kind of a mess for the Miz. That's been a problem pretty much in road games all year long. Now, the bigger topic today, hey, everybody, it's a Friday. We get to talk about assault. We get to talk about misdemeanor domestic violence. Isn't that fun? So the Josh Jacobs charges from the Memorial Day weekend arrest finally came down from the Brown County DA's office. He was booked on 5 charges, one of them felony. He is officially charged with 2 things, both misdemeanors. But now what does that mean for Jacobs in Green Bay? Could the Packers release him? Is the NFL going to suspend him? Kind of feels like that's likely. Goody talked about this on Wednesday morning, which I now think was a plan by Goody and the Packers to have that press conference before joint practice on Wednesday so they could address this, knowing it was probably coming on Thursday. I'm sure the last thing Goody wanted to do was talk after this news came down. So my feeling is they talked to Matt Schneidman of The Athletic or one of the beat reporters and said, could you ask us about this on Wednesday so I can get a statement out there, let you know what the plan is in case there's a suspension, and then when the news comes 24 hours later, then we don't have to talk about it. I think kind of that's how it worked. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Tucker Kraft talking to the media and still no contract extension there. We're going to talk about signing Jonnu Smith, which I think was a great move on Thursday. That was the first part of Thursday. That was all good news. Then the Jacobs news. And, of course, it's a Packer game day, the preseason finale at Lambeau Field with Mike LaFleur, Mike, and the Cardinals in town tonight. That's a 7 o'clock kickoff. We'll go over that as well. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. In time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin! Record-breaking run!
Morgan a smash up the middle, base hit to center. Here comes Gomez around third. A throw and the Brewers win!
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, it's complete interception. And there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul, and a pinnacle ball throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there, and they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Yeah, welcome in on your Friday morning. We've had a busy week here on the B93 Morning Show. It's been a busy week getting back from vacation. We had all the Packers stuff and all the Brewers stuff. Oh, and we've got to do a bold prediction. Now, you're just going to have to believe me on the bold prediction. I have it written down. I know there's no way for me to prove this to you. We are going to have to be in the trust tree. That bold prediction number 1 of 5 was written down, and it was written down illegibly in pen, in ink, 2 days ago. And I had this as a bold prediction before the Josh Jacobs news came yesterday, and now we don't know what's going to happen with that. We are in very murky waters there. But you're just going to have to trust that the bold prediction I have for today was already written down before the Josh Jacobs news yesterday. We're going to have to operate like we believe each other. We're going to have to do that. Well, we had all that going on. And then from the country music side of things, or just the entertainment side of things, the Tuesday afternoon news of Dolly Parton passing at 80. It's one of those things, it did kind of take the wind out of me. I compared it on Wednesday. We did a whole Wednesday morning show dedicated to Dolly and playing all the Dolly Parton songs. And we play a lot of her stuff on Throwback Thursday and Free for All Friday and days like that anyway. So being in country radio and working in this format for 20 years, I am very familiar with her being a legend, an icon, whatever word you want to kind of throw on it. She's a one of one, probably the best way to put it. But it is one of those things where I know that when she's alive, like I knew that about her. There is a short list of impactful country performers, and she's maybe on the Mount Rushmore, certainly a female artist. I knew that. But then when she passed, and we spent the whole Wednesday show playing all the number ones and playing a bunch of clips from her time with Carson on the Tonight Show and all the different entertainment stuff she did, it's one of those things where I knew she was a legend, but then by the end of Wednesday's morning show, after we spent all the time going through all the stuff, I kind of thought, man, she was even bigger than I thought she was. You know, one of those kind of things. It did take the wind out of me a bit, the same way it did. I think we were at the end of a morning show in January of last year when the Euchre news came down. Now, Euchre was a little bit more expected because he was in his 90s and there were some health issues there that we were aware of. It sounds like Dolly had a short-term battle with cancer in there. But I was not expecting that news on Tuesday afternoon. I was driving home and I heard it on the radio. Thank God. Someone out there's listening to the radio, but I heard it on the radio. And it did kind of take the wind out of me a little bit. And we spent a lot of Tuesday going through all the Dolly stuff. And then we ended up having this big debate on Thursday. Somebody tracked down Dolly Parton played at the Sheboygan County Fair, which is coming up next weekend. She played at the Shebco Fair in 1993. Somebody found an old flyer of it. And on that flyer, it's not just Dolly in 93, which she's at the tail end of her prime, but still a huge name in that era and still releasing singles. So it was Dolly in 93, REO's Speedwagon in 93, they were still big, and Kathy Mattea was another big country name that was performing at the county fair. Now, what always happens when we see posts like that from the fair, and Brat Day suffers from this a lot too, and any festival, fair, or venue in Sheboygan County that used to have bigger names in town, and you post something like that, the comment section always devolves into, why can't things be as good as they once were? It is our never-ending quest as human beings to figure out as we get older, why aren't things as good as they used to be? I am trying so hard, everybody. I'm really trying. In my early 40s, I can feel it coming. I mean, I feel myself doing it already and have been probably for 4 or 5 years. I am fighting with every shred of my being to not be everything was better back in the day guy, because of course it was. I was younger, I was healthier, everybody was alive. I mean, of course everything was better. Things were cheaper. You weren't making as much money though either. So of course everything was better 20 or 30 years ago when you were in your 20s, when you were a kid. Now, how could it not be? I'm trying not to be that guy. But you almost always end up with this Brat Days, which we just had at the beginning of the month. They always suffer from this too, where I think this year they had a cover Lady Gaga band and some other cover band. And people immediately, when they post about that, they get in the comment section and say, remember when Leonard Skinner was here? Or remember when Alabama played at Brat Days? And all these big names that were kind of in their heyday. So that was brought up to me on the text line on Thursday. And the explanation is pretty simple. It's that it costs a ton of money to bring in live performances now. It did not cost a lot of money in the 70s, 80s, and 90s to do that. I know nobody wants to hear that. I'm pretty sure my explanation, while it's rational and makes sense, which are two things I rarely accomplish on the morning show. Rarely. What was there, a lunar eclipse last night? Kind of that deal. But it makes total sense why it's more expensive and why you can't risk bringing in artists like that all the time, because if it flops, you're going to be chewing $50,000, and who knows when you'll recover from that. But I know the general public doesn't want to hear that. They just want things to be the way that they were. I don't care why there's an explanation for this. I just want things to be the way they were. But that's the explanation. In the 80s, especially in the 80s and 90s, the economics of being a musician have changed so much from then to now. Artists made their money and record labels made their money on record deals and selling albums, selling CDs. Because when you think back to that era, I think back to even when I was a kid in the 90s, it didn't matter if you had a hit or two on the radio. And I know there were cassette tape singles and CD singles, but the market never really evolved for that kind of stuff for whatever reason. So if you had a hit or two on the radio and I wanted to have that music and I didn't want to just record it on a cassette tape that's sitting in my boombox, and then when the radio plays it, when the radio station plays it, I quick hit record play. Was that the combo you had to hit? And then some idiot DJ like me was talking over the beginning or talking over the end and you hate it. Shut up, dude. Just play. I want to have this song. So unless you were doing that and you consistently were able to record your songs off of the radio, which is a real thing that happened a lot, you would have to buy a CD. And it didn't matter if the other 15 songs on the CD were utter trash. you had to buy a $19, $20 CD at Sam Goody or Nickelodeon in Sheboygan back in the day or wherever. You had to buy an entire CD. Now, look, the whole CD might have been good, but you were initially invested only because you liked a song or two. That world doesn't exist anymore. So in 2000 or 99, I guess, 2000, 2001, Napster hops onto the scene, and I can't believe this is legit. No, it's not. I remember thinking that there's no way this is legal, and then in the back of my brain, or I read some article, yeah, it's definitely not legal. So just so you know that. But people started to get into that world of being able to download individual songs for free. But then iTunes also hopped onto the scene in 2003 where you could buy an individual track for 99 cents or $1.29. So no longer did you live in a world where you had to pay $18 for a CD. You could pay $3 for two songs or $1 for a song. And then you get to Spotify and Pandora where you're paying $10 a month or whatever it is, $15 a month, and you have access to basically everything. If you have Spotify, you have access to almost every song that's ever been recorded in the history of mankind. And you pay $15 a month, and they don't see the residuals from that the way they would an album sale. So at that juncture in music in 04, 05, 06, labels and artists said, okay, we used to sell 800,000 copies of this album. Now we're selling 100,000. How do we make up that deficit? And the answer is to start charging exorbitant fees for live shows, for making appearances at fairs, at Brat Days, at Fiserv Forum, at AmFam Field, whatever. That's where they made up the economic difference between where they were selling albums and how do we get back to making that kind of money? We're going to make our money on touring. Back in the day, too, you would tour for a lot less money relative to today, but then you'd also have your merch, which they have now, too, T-shirts and hats, but you'd sell albums at your show. So Dolly performed in front of 3,000 people probably-ish that year at the county fair, and if 400 people or 300 people or 500 people in that audience buy a $20 CD, that's where you make up some of that gap as well. So that's how they adjusted. That's how artists and labels adjusted. So now, Dolly probably cost about $50K to bring in 1993. An artist of Dolly's resume would probably cost $250K to bring in now. And then you're talking about, are people going to buy tickets? If we charge $80 for a ticket, $100 for a ticket, are people going to pay that? And the same people that want things to be the way they were back then want that peak entertainment, and they would like to pay very little to no money for it. So that's the dichotomy there. That's the gap you're trying to navigate. So if you are in charge of a venue, of a fair, of a festival like Brat Days or Summerfest or on a much grander scale or whatever, you've got to determine, all right, we've got an artist we want to bring in for $100,000. We want to bring in Trace Adkins for $100,000. We've got 3,000 seats. Maybe you get a couple of sponsors to underwrite it. But are we going to be able to sell 3,000 tickets at $80 a pop for the Sheboygan County Fair? Probably not. And if you end up eating $50K, you're trying to make that back for a decade. So it's a much riskier endeavor now to bring in artists of that caliber because they just cost so much more money. And if you have a flop, you're chewing on that for, like I said, the better part of a half a decade or maybe a decade. But that's the explanation. I tried to reason that out on the air, and I'm pretty sure people just said, we don't care. We just want great artists for very little to no money. Oh, okay. Sounds good. Just book a national act and charge $15 a piece. What's so hard about that? Okay. So that was a big topic this week, too. Yeah, the Dolly passing was big news. All right, let's hop into it. We're going to start with the Packers. Now, there's a lot of Packers stuff. We have to start with Josh Jacobs, of course, but there was the LaFleur Bowl on Wednesday, the joint practice. There is the alternate jersey they dropped. Oh, boy, that got everybody revved up. There is Tucker Kraft still having not signed an extension, and there is a rumor that one Packer blogger, beat reporter, I'm using in quotes, in particular, is hitching his wagon to that the Packers may still be in the market to make a big trade before the year begins and acquire a guy who is in town tonight, defensive lineman for the Cardinals, Josh Sweat. We're going to talk about that too. But we do have to start with assault, and I wish we didn't. I wish that weren't the case because this topic is no fun to talk about. But the final charges finally came down on Thursday. Now, like I said in the teaser, I think we said in the teaser, Goody talked to the media Wednesday morning before joint practice. And during that press conference, Matt Schneidman of The Athletic asked him, look, I'm not going to have you speculate on a legal situation, but if Josh Jacobs were to be suspended, how comfortable are you with the running back room? And Goody said, well, if that happens, we feel pretty good. I'm not ruling out making a move. Now, when I look back at the timing of that, and the news comes down from the Brown County DA on Thursday, Clearly, the Packers knew that was coming. So I'm thinking Goody thought to himself, instead of having to address this after the fact and have us be in the weeds here, let me just address it before. And then he's not going to talk to the media again, I don't think, until maybe a week or two from now. He may not talk to the media again until the trade deadline. I don't know. I think he'll have to talk one more time. And he's going to say, we can't comment on a legal situation. We're cooperating. He's going to say the exact same thing the Packers said yesterday when they released their statement. We are aware of the charges. We are cooperating. Jacobs is cooperating with the Brown County DA, with the NFL. We have no further statement at this time. But when I look back now at the timing of that, it seemed like an odd question to come out of nowhere during Wednesday morning's press conference. And that was the soundbite that we used on Thursday morning for Sportscast. And a lot of people did, because that was the juiciest tidbit that came out of that press conference. But I don't think it was without reason that he talked specifically on Wednesday morning before this news, and specifically that question was asked of Goody in that Wednesday press conference. So Josh Jacobs was booked in May, Memorial Day weekend. This happened on May 23rd. He was booked on May 26th, spent one night in jail, was released. He was charged initially he was booked with 5 charges. One of them was a felony, 4 were misdemeanor. I think the felony was strangulation. And then remember, after that, it just kind of seemed like nothing was coming out of it, to the point where, we do spots in Green Bay on radio stations. We do a spot on HBL every morning around 8 o'clock. And just talking to some of the hosts of those shows off the air when that came up, especially on Thursday morning, because we had the audio from Goody on Wednesday. So before the news came down Thursday afternoon, we were talking a little bit off the air, and we all kind of felt like, God, it's been 3 months, and Brown County DA's office said they were going to continue investigating. But it feels like if something big would have come from that, it would have come already. That's kind of where we thought we were Thursday morning. Oh, John. Jonathan. And then the news comes down Thursday. But I think a lot of people thought, boy, this has to be in the rearview mirror, right? He's at practice, so they wouldn't let that happen if something major was happening. And it just kind of felt like nothing was going to come of this ultimately. So the news comes down yesterday. Instead of the 5 charges, he is booked on 2 misdemeanor charges. 1 misdemeanor assault and 1 misdemeanor criminal destruction of property, which is his girlfriend's cell phone. If you read the entire report, now look, I'm not a legal guy here, so I'm barely a guy. I'm barely a sports person. I'm barely a podcaster, barely a DJ. So I am treading a little bit here. I want to be honest with you. I'm treading into legal matters that I'm not entirely 100% sure of. So it would beg the question, why do it at all, John? Well, we got to fill time somehow. So I read the entire criminal report, I think is the way to put it, right? That they released yesterday with the charges and with the explanation of their investigation. And I read it all the way through. So the Reader's Digest version of what happened here is that Josh Jacobs and his girlfriend were at Jacobs' home, and she was going through his phone. Tale as old as time. Tale as old as modern time. And it's not just that way. It goes both ways, which we'll find out here in a second. Cell phones are just the bane of our existence. So she's going through his phone and discovers that he has been maybe messaging some other women, doesn't get happy about it. Then he wants to go through her phone. And then we have the back and forth where I want to see her. No, I want to see her phone. So he gets her phone and she's saying, give me my phone back. And things are escalating to the point where at one point Josh Jacobs gets in a car with her phone and drives away, and she wants her phone. So she gets in another car, and they are literally at, I don't think a high speed, but they are chasing each other around suburban Green Bay. And at one point, he pulls into a driveway, and she tries to block him from leaving. And eventually, he gets out of that, and he goes back to his house. She follows him in, and then that is where this incident occurred, that she was shoved, it sounds like, per the report. And there is some video, but we're not sure what the video is. And she is shoved. She hits her head when she is shoved down, and then kind of takes a minute or two, I guess, and then goes back into the house. And that's kind of where the report leads to. So a couple of Mensa scholars here to begin with. I'm not justifying anything or minimalizing anything, but the whole beginning of this fight, it's like, what are we doing here, guys? So anyway, that's the report, and then that leads to the 2 misdemeanors that he is ultimately charged with yesterday. I will say this, and again, I am very, very much not in the world of prosecution, of understanding why they're doing this charge, not that charge. If I'm reading that correctly, and that's what happened. And again, we're not sure exactly what video exists. Apparently, Josh Jacobs does have, like a lot of people do, and I'm sure a lot of rich people do, has Ring cameras and surveillance cameras. Now, there is some speculation that the reason this took so long, like why did this take 3 months? There is some speculation, okay, this is speculation, that perhaps some of that video was destroyed and they had to piece things back together by piecing that video back together. And that's what took so long. So if I'm reading the report correctly, and that's what they're seeing, or that's what she's saying happened, and they can determine that they can verify that somehow, I am very surprised that felony domestic violence or felony assault is not a part of this. If she was shoved and hit her head and maybe suffered some kind of head injury, concussion, who knows? I'm very surprised that wasn't on there. Now, I will say a felony domestic violence charge brings with it at the NFL level an automatic 6-game suspension, basically. So I don't know if anything's happening there where they reduce the charge, or maybe they reduce the charge because they thought they have a better chance of having that stick on Jacob. I don't know. If I read that through, I would think that is to the level, if that's how it went down, of a felony assault. But whatever. He gets charged with 2 misdemeanors, and that's where we're at in terms of the charges. Now, what does the NFL do, and what do the Packers do? And before we go any further, I simply want to say what I'm about to speculate on as to the different ways this could go. I am not personally saying, I think the NFL should do this. I am not saying I think the Packers should do this. I'm simply going through, from a podcaster perspective, what could happen here. Because people are going to react to this, and you saw it all over Twitter yesterday, which you knew was going to happen. Packer fans, NFL fans, people are going to react to this in many different ways. Some people are going to say, let the legal process play out, which it sounds like Josh Jacobs, per his agent, they are willing to do. They have a court date in mid-November. Let this play out through the legal system. Maybe there's more evidence. Maybe the charges go up. Maybe they go away. But let this play out before we make any rash or harsh judgments. Some will say that. Some will say, if there is video of Josh Jacobs shoving a woman to the ground and her hitting her head, and that video comes out, he needs to be released. Others will say, I don't need to see a video. I believe the report and the 3-month investigation, and that's what happened. I don't need to see the video of that. He needs to be released immediately. So however you feel about that is how you feel about it. But there are going to be a lot of different opinions. It feels to me, with the way Goody was talking about a potential suspension on Wednesday, where he clearly knew something was coming, and we didn't know at the time. It felt to me, even on Wednesday morning as I was cutting that audio up, that he feels like a suspension is coming. And then we get the news on Thursday. It feels to me like a suspension from the NFL is inevitable if these charges stick. And if you look at comparable cases, like I said, it would be an automatic 6 games if this were a felony. My guess is this is going to be anywhere from 4 to 8 games in terms of a suspension. Maybe he gets 6, and if it doesn't rise to the felony level, maybe he appeals and it goes down to 4 or 3. I would think on the really low side, 3 games, and on the high side, probably 8 games. But in my opinion, just reading the waves here, it feels to me like a suspension is coming. And I'm going to keep my eye on this, too, by the way, because there's a strong chance that we get some kind of information. I'm going to check it right now because we're just in the middle of this, and I just want to make sure that nothing has happened already. This could happen at any minute. Story continues to develop. Okay, nothing as of yet. But my feeling is he is going to be suspended. Now, the other question is, what do the Packers do here? Do they release him? Like I said, there were a lot of fans that reacted to reading that report and the story and said, this is not the kind of person you want on this team. This person needs to go. They need to be released immediately. Based on the Packers' statement yesterday, it sounds like they are not going to rush to make any moves here. They want to see this play out a little bit further before they make a move. But I do think there is a chance that they will end up in a spot where they could release Josh Jacobs, because what you've got to figure out here, first of all, they have to figure out, and again, I don't want to minimize what happened here into just PR for a football team. You know, I understand that does not come off as sensitive to the severity of this. But again, we are a sports podcast that talks about the Packers and Brewers. The Packers have to figure out, and I assume whatever video is out there, I assume the Packers have seen that. My assumption is that all of the people that need to see it have seen it. So the Packers need to figure out, if something like that comes out, if a video comes out or whatever, or more details come out, how does this look organizationally? Do we need to cut ties with this guy? The Packers also kind of need to figure out, what are the options, like Goody talked about that running back room, because unfortunately for Goody, from a football personnel perspective, and we talked about this coming out of the draft, they are exposed here a little bit. They didn't do a lot at the running back position. I think they were counting on having Josh Jacobs. They were counting on an injured Marshawn Lloyd to be healthy. and they're counting on Chris Brooks to be there. They didn't re-sign Emmanuel Wilson. He's gone. They didn't draft anybody. Remember, we talked about coming out of the draft. I was surprised that late in the draft, they didn't spend one of those 6th or 7th rounders just on a running back flyer just to get another guy in the room. Now, I know Pierre Strong, they signed him. He had a nice kick return in Denver, so he's an option. But they've got to figure out from a personnel perspective what they want to do here, too. And we'll see where they land on all of that. But that is out there. I mean, I think there's a chance. I don't want to put a percentage chance on it, but I think there is a chance that they are going to have to release him. The other thing becomes, if he does want to go to court, and again, based on yesterday, it sounds like that's the direction he wants to go. Like I said, that first hearing isn't until November 17th. So what does that mean from now till then? Can he play? Would they suspend him? I don't think the NFL would levy any kind of suspension until the legal process has played out. They could put him on the commissioner's exempt list. That has happened before for guys that are in legal trouble, and you don't want them on the field, and you don't want that image on the field. So, okay, if you're going to go to court with this, then you're going to be on the commissioner's exempt list and not be able to play until this gets resolved. And then you run the risk of he's on the commissioner exempt list until mid-November, and then these charges stick, and then he gets a 6-game suspension on top of that, and he's out for the entire year. So they also have to figure that out, and they have to figure out, okay, if he's allowed to play, let's say no suspension comes down, the NFL does nothing with him. They're going to wait to see how this plays out in court. So then do you let him play? I mean, do you let him play the first 9 or 10 weeks of the season where he's helping the team and he's scoring touchdowns and our fans cheering for him? You know, do you want that? Do you make Josh Jacobs unavailable to media if he's playing in the interim? Because you know what the questions are going to be. Do you want the teammates to have to deal with these questions? Because if he's playing and he's there, those teammates are going to get asked those questions a lot, and it's going to get annoying for them. So you just wonder how they orchestrate all of the different things that are in the air. But in the immediacy of the charges on Thursday and the statement from the Packers, it feels like they're just saying, okay, we're going to take a breath here for a second, and we're just going to see how this plays out over the next couple of days. If any more information comes out, if any more video stuff comes out, we'll look at it then. But that's where we're at. So it kind of felt to me prior to Wednesday, I guess, with the Goody press conference, it kind of felt to me like this was not going to be a big deal, but it turns into this is going to be kind of a deal. This is a deal, and they're going to have to figure out how they want to navigate their way through this. But that was the biggest news that came out of yesterday. Now, the other news before the Jacobs news, which I thought was good news, was a signing for some tight end depth. Now, we'll talk about Tucker Kraft in a second. He's coming back from an ACL injury. He seems intent on playing in week 1. I think he'll be out there week 1. Is he going to have a contract? I don't know. But, you know, you had Luke Musgrave, who we all had high hopes for. And coming out of the draft that year, I thought Luke Musgrave was going to be Tucker Kraft. And Tucker Kraft would be more of a grinder, blocking tight end, a catch here or there. We thought Luke Musgrave, of the 2 third-round tight end picks they made, Kraft and Musgrave, we thought Musgrave, I did at least, I thought he would be the field-stretching guy who was racking up 700, 800 yards receiving and 50 or 60 catches and 7 or 8 touchdowns. But he's been battling an injury all offseason. He's never really fulfilled the potential we kind of thought that he had. His best game is probably the Dallas playoff game in 23. So they needed some tight end depth, and they got it. I think it's a great signing. Jonnu Smith is signed to a 1-year contract. He was in Pittsburgh with Rodgers last year. Kind of an year, 38 catches, 2 touchdowns. 2 years ago in 2024 was his career year by far, a Pro Bowl year in Miami. 88 catches, better than 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. Where'd that come from? And he's only 31 years old, and he's a solid blocker, and you can give him the ball in the backfield once in a while. Jonnu Smith, if you are a fantasy football player, Jonnu Smith is the guy where your tight end is on a bye, and it's week 9, and you're looking at the waiver wire, and you're clicking on the best available, and Jonnu Smith comes up, and you think, all right, maybe he gives me 3 catches and 40 yards. That's who Jonnu Smith is. But that as your tight end to pair with Tucker Kraft, who we believe is a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber tight end, that makes perfect sense. That's the perfect spot for him. But I think if you're a fantasy football player, you kind of know that name. You know the Jonnu Smith name by perusing the waiver wire. My buddies and I always joke about the old Billy Madison where they're looking for a piece of dog poop. This looks like a nice piece of... That's always how I feel when I'm going through the waiver wire. You're trying to find somebody to fill an injury spot, a bye week spot. Jonnu Smith was that guy that kind of got passed around like, oh, I'll pick him up for a week, then I'll drop him. Then a week later, somebody else needs him when their tight end is on bye. All right, I'll pick up Jonnu Smith. Maybe he randomly catches a touchdown. But those numbers, I didn't realize how good he was in Miami. I mean, we're talking almost 90 catches and 900 yards and almost 10 touchdowns last year, 2 years ago, a Pro Bowl year. But that, I thought, was a very solid move for some depth at that position as they head into the final preseason game tonight and cut down on Sunday. Now, the other Packer news, 2 more tidbits. Josh Sweat. There is one Packer reporter. His name is Easton Butler. I'm telling you, he is staking his entire Twitter reputation, his entire however many followers he has, 25,000 followers, as a Packer commenter and a blogger, a blue checkmark guy. He is staking his entire reputation on Josh Sweat. He has been talking about this for better than a month. And the way he is talking about it on social media, he is basically saying it is a foregone conclusion. Josh Sweat is going to be a Green Bay Packer. Now, Josh Sweat spent the first, how many years? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years in Philly, won a title in Philly. And he was really solid there, kind of a 7, 8, 9 sack a year guy in Philadelphia. Then he went to Arizona last year, and he spent 1 year there, had a career year, 12 sacks in 17 games with the Cardinals last year, 30 tackles. He's really good, a couple of forced fumbles. And he was playing for now Packer defensive coordinator, then Cardinal head coach, Jonathan Gannon. So he was outspoken when the Cardinals fired Gannon, even though they won, 5 games last year? I don't know why you'd run to the defense of a coach you won 4 or 5 games with, but whatever. Clearly they have a good relationship. When the Cardinals fired Jonathan Gannon after the year, Sweat was very outspoken about not being happy about that. I love playing for him. I'd like to play for him again. So if you're connecting all the dots here and reading the tea leaves, maybe Josh Sweat, who is not happy in Arizona. By the way, I can't stop saying Arizona like this. This is a super deep cut reference, but if you watch the TV show What We Do in the Shadows.
This is the way we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
Like.
This is the way we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
This is the full
You say you're
clip
from Tucson, but you talk all fancy in Europe like.
This is the way we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
My wife and I love that show and that character, Laszlo. And every time I said Arizona Cardinals, I want to say Arizona. This is how we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
Like.
This is the way we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
So that team is going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Josh Sweat is, how old is he? 29 years old, still in the prime of his career, coming off of a career year. But do you want to waste a year of your prime getting beat up and getting knocked around for a team that's going to win 4 or 5 games when the coach that you want to play for is on, we hope, a division title contending team and a team that could make a run? So, and the Cardinals, I mean, I'm sure they like having good defensive players, but from their perspective, for a 3 or 4 win team this year, you'd like to acquire some draft picks. Now, I don't know how many draft picks the Packers already gave up. 2 first-rounders for Micah Parsons. They have no first-rounder in the upcoming draft. They didn't have one this year. I don't know what it would cost to get him, a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, a 2nd-round pick. I don't know. But Easton Butler has staked his entire social media reputation. And Ian Rappaport and all the big guys, Shefty, Rappaport, all those guys have said he is not coming to Green Bay. Josh Sweat is not coming to Green Bay. And Easton Butler just doubles and triples and quadruples down on he's coming. And he says he has a source. He says, I have a source. I've got a source. I've said that before, too. I have a source. And that source is telling me this is happening, and they're in town tonight. I mean, what a victory lap for him. If this happens tonight after the game is done or before the game and Josh Sweat changes jerseys at halftime or whatever it is, if that happens, he is going to take, and rightfully so, he will take the biggest victory lap on Twitter. But every post he has had, it just keeps on saying, Josh Sweat is going to be a Green Bay Packer. Josh Sweat is going to be a big Green Bay Packer. Read my lips. So we'll see if anything comes of that. Now, the other news this week is Tucker Kraft. Kraft was in the joint practice on Wednesday. They talked to him after practice, said he feels great. The target is still to be on the field for week 1 in Minnesota, coming back from the ACL middle of last year. Tucker Kraft has not gotten a contract extension yet. And I have to admit, I think we talked about this. If you go like 6 episodes back at the beginning of training camp, with the extension for Watson and the extension for Devontae Wyatt and the extension for who else signed one, Jaden Reed and the Sean Ryan extension. Remember, we've gone over every time this team this offseason has signed a name to a contract extension. What does Goody get asked in the press conference that he does nearest that signing? He always gets asked, what does that mean for Tucker Kraft? If you're giving Devontae Wyatt this money, if you're giving Christian Watson money, do you have money left over to sign what you think is a generational tight end? And every time that's brought up, Goody says, Russ Ball, the money man, he's got it. He understands, the bag man understands everything that has to happen here. And we don't think that this will have any impact in our ability to re-sign Tucker Kraft. And he's been very dismissive of that. I thought at the beginning of training camp, my feeling was this will get done during camp. And I think I even said on different spots we did on morning shows, I would be very surprised if this is not done by the end of training camp. Well, we're at the end of training camp, baby. Technically, it's over already. You've got the last preseason game tonight. You've got opening weekend in 2 weekends, and it's not done. And they asked Tucker Kraft about that on Wednesday. And for the first time, let me see if I can find the audio here. For the first time, shame on me for not getting this up. For the first time, it sounded to me like Tucker Kraft had a little bit of exasperation, a little bit of frustration that this wasn't done. He has said all the right things. Now we're going to have to do this on the fly.
It seems like if there's anyone who appreciates the extra contact in the joint practice.
We're going to, hold on.
Case, she was referring, getting an opportunity to have a good team.
We're deleting all this. Okay, so it's not going to be there at all anyway. All right, so we're deleting all of this in post. So he was asked about that this week, and he took a beat and just let out a sigh and said, they know what I'm worth, I know what I'm worth, and we're working towards it, and we want to get this done. And it was brought up to Goody in the Wednesday press conference as well that they want to try to get this done. Of course, Goody always gives you the, well, these things are more complicated than people make them out to be, and you got to make sure everything is exactly the way you want it to be, and that can take some time. But the goal is to get this done before week 1. It is interesting. I don't know what the hang-up is. My guess would be guaranteed money and the amount of guaranteed money. And I do wonder, they're kind of putting Tucker Kraft in a spot he probably doesn't want to be in right now. Because Tucker Kraft, as we know him, and look, do we know everybody all the way through? No. What did we just learn with Josh Jacobs? I mean, we don't know these guys. What we know of his interviews and what we know of his personality on the field is that Tucker Kraft is very much the team guy. All I care about is the team. Whatever I can do to help the team. That is his character. I mean, that's the kind of persona he throws out there. I will do anything for the team. I'll lay it on the line. I'll block. I'll catch passes, whatever you want me to do. And that's a part of what is so endearing about Tucker Kraft. Blue collar, I think very relatable for people in the state of Wisconsin. We love him for that. And he's been asked many times, some guys of his stature with a contract negotiation going on and that up in the air, they wouldn't practice. They wouldn't practice in training camp. They wouldn't practice in joint practice on Wednesday. They wouldn't play in preseason games because they don't want to risk getting hurt. And especially a guy coming off of a major injury the way he is, you never know what can happen. And if he gets hurt, I mean, if he blows an Achilles, if he tears another ACL or whatever happens as a hamstring issue, that could hurt him during this negotiation. So I think as fans, we appreciate, Tucker Kraft, he's doing it the right way. You know what I mean? Like, we all feel that way. He cares about the team, and he's willing to put his body on the line, even though the contract is inside. We all love that about Tucker Kraft. But I wonder, from a negotiation perspective, is Tucker Kraft putting himself in a difficult spot? Because the Packers are saying, look, you're under contract for this year. So we'd love to give you the extension. We'd love to give you a boatload of money. We want you to become a foundational player here. But if we can't agree, you're out there. It's one thing if you're Goody and Russ Ball and you're looking around the room and you're saying, Tucker Kraft isn't going to play. He's not practicing. He's not at camp. We need to get this deal done if we want to get him into training camp. The fact that Tucker Kraft has this sort of personality and character where he wants to do things right by the team and he wants to be that guy, that may hurt him from a negotiating perspective because the Packers may be saying, look, he's asking for a little bit more money than we want to give him. He's out there. It's not like he's holding out, right? I mean, they may say that. He's not holding out. It's not in his personality to hold out. So if we don't get it done, he's going to play because that's who he is. And maybe we work something out during the year. Maybe we work something out after the year. It kind of feels like they're backing Tucker Kraft into a corner a little bit where Tucker Kraft might have to do something he doesn't want to do. And that would be to hold out or to step away or to stop practicing. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But I do wonder if that's a part of why this has taken so long, that Tucker Kraft's whole ideology and who he is as a person, that he doesn't want to sit out, doesn't want to hold out, doesn't want to appear that way in front of the fans and in front of his teammates. I wonder if that is actually hurting him during the course of this negotiation, because the Packers could always just say, look, he's going to be out there anyway. He's not the kind of person that would just step away from the game or go home, take his ball and go home and not play in week 1 in Minnesota if he didn't have a new contract. So I feel like they're kind of pushing him a little bit. And Wednesday was the first day where it sort of felt like he was not feeling it anymore. He's always been super positive and all right, we're going to get this done. And he said all that stuff again on Wednesday. But it just kind of felt like the brief pause he had and the little sigh he had before he said, how do I want to say this? He said that too. How do I want to say this? It just kind of felt like it was fraying a bit on him or weighing on him a little bit more than it had been in every conversation he had up until that point. I do sort of wonder if Tucker Kraft being the kind of stand-up teammate guy that he is, if that is hurting him in this deal getting done. I think they'll find a way to get this rectified before week 1, so it's not going to be a talking point. But I am somewhat surprised that we are recording a podcast on August 28th, and we have not yet had the Tucker Kraft contract. Now, the last thing, alternate jerseys dropped. I wrote a blog about this. I don't care. I don't want to become who cares guy, but as we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, I also don't want to be wistful guy where everything was greater back in the day. I think ultimately the aging process, we all just end up being what we don't want to be, right? We all just end up at that end game. So that's where I'm going. Because for many years, I always roll my eyes and hate who cares guy. Anytime a news article is put on Facebook or Twitter, you always click on the comment section. There's always going to be, who cares? This is news? Who cares? And the no one cares gifs and all that stuff. I don't want to be who cares guy, but I kind of am. I don't. I can fake it. You want me to fake it? I can fake it like Elaine. Fake. The panting, the moaning. Fake. If you want me to get really fired up about it. So they're going to wear these jerseys in October against the Bears. These are rivalry edition jerseys. The Bears jerseys look like University of Illinois jerseys or Syracuse jerseys. So that's what they're going to wear. The Packers are going with a little different shade of green, a little different structure on the number. They've got a cream color, which I do like. As I put in the blog, the one thing when we talk about alternate jerseys, one of my favorite alternates for any team I root for was the Bucks Cream City jerseys, and they finally were able to get back to those last year. Remember, they couldn't wear those because something about the advertisements that they CGI'd onto the court, it didn't jive well with that color of jersey. Like, if a player ran over that part of the court, that advertisement would superimpose over the player because of the cream jerseys. It's like if you wear green on TV. So they couldn't wear it for many years. They finally brought them back last year. I do love a good cream color, and it looks like they're kind of cream and green, and they've got a little bit of a different shade of helmet. I do also appreciate the patch they have. I think on their right shoulder is the old GB logo, like the G and the B overlaid. That's an old Vince Lombardi thing. They would wear those with practice pants and jerseys in the Lombardi era. So a little tip of the cap to history there. And they released a whole statement on their Twitter page about why we chose this, why we chose the colors. who cares? I may enjoy becoming who cares guy. I talked about that at the end of the blog too. Maybe turning into the thing I least want to be will end up being fun at the end of the day. It could be. I feel like who cares people always have a good time. They always get a handful of likes. That's why they do it, because it always, from that segment, will always get likes. You'll always get a bunch of likes. Who cares? This is news. Who cares? I just can't get fired up about jerseys anymore. I tried. I couldn't do it. They're fine. That's what I said in the blog. They're fine. They have an alternate jersey. It's fine. So that was news this week as well. Did we get all the Packers stuff? Jacobs jersey. Practice on Wednesday didn't go the best. Started off good, but they went 0 for at the end of practice in all of the 2-minute drills. Packer number 1, number 2 offense couldn't score. Cardinal number 1, number 2 offense both scored touchdowns. And as we just said, that Cardinal team is not supposed to be very good. Like a 3-4 win team could be the worst team in the league. So that's not encouraging. That wasn't great on Wednesday. But you had the Matt LaFleur, Mike LaFleur combo. Mike LaFleur now the head coach in Arizona. And you also had the Bo Melton, Max Melton combo there. So there were a couple of brother rivalries happening there, on Wednesday. So final Pro Bowl or preseason game, Pro Bowl game. That's going away, by the way. Did you see that? That had to happen. Should we play taps in honor of the Pro Bowl? The Pro Bowl's gone. They tried so many ways to make that interesting. The skills competition, flag football. They tried every possible iteration. It just doesn't make sense in a sport like that at the end of the year where guys aren't going to give it their best ever. Nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to get their bell rung, rightfully so. So it's just going away. Now, they're going to keep the Pro Bowl designations, which I also kind of like. I actually think the Pro Bowl designation now that the game is gone, I think it's going to mean a little more, because what happened in the last 4 or 5 years was you'd get the list of Pro Bowlers, all of the Pro Bowlers, and all names that made sense. And then as those guys dropped off, like you'd have Joe Burrow say, I don't want to play in the Pro Bowl. Okay, so then who's the next guy? Well, that guy doesn't want to play. Or who's the next guy? You ended up having like the 17th and 18th best quarterback in the league and the 20th best running back, because none of these guys wanted to play. None of them wanted to make the trip. None of them wanted to do any of it. So now, since they're not playing a game, you just name the Pro Bowlers, like all pro players, I guess. You just name the Pro Bowlers, and you get that. You get that designation as a Pro Bowler, and it sticks. I do think it kind of makes getting a Pro Bowl nod mean more now, because you're not going to go down the line to 80 different guys after you get past all the guys who don't want to play. So that was a part of it. Final preseason game on the way tonight from Lambeau. It'll be the Cardinals and Packers, 7 o'clock tonight. None of the number ones are going to play. This is going to be a deep roster kind of deal. If you're really into the 70th and 80th players on this Packer roster and who might be the 53rd man and all that kind of stuff, this is the night for you. I'll have it on, but it's just one of those where we got to check it off the box, check it off the list, and move on to the regular season. That is tonight. Now, we are going to do our first bold prediction, like I said. Now, we did this last year. I forget what they all were. I think my bold predictions were Packers will be the 1 seed, maybe. I think we had last year Packers will have the number 1 defense for the first time since 96. That didn't happen. Top 10, though. We had Matthew Golden breaking the rookie receiving record of whatever it was, 1,200 yards. We had Josh Jacobs breaking the Amon Green rushing record of 1,800 yards or whatever it was, 1,900 yards. We had all those. None of them hit. I was 0 for 5. Now, like I said, you are simply going to have to trust that I had this as today's bold prediction before the Josh Jacobs news. And look, like we just went over, we don't know what they're going to do with Josh Jacobs. It is entirely possible that Josh Jacobs is the number 1 tailback in the backfield September 13th in Minnesota. And then my bold prediction is kind of fighting uphill a little bit to begin the year. Even before the news on Thursday with the charges and whatever now that means for suspensions or court or jail time, whatever. Even before that, my first bold prediction is this. Third-year running back Marshawn Lloyd is going to lead the Packers this season in rushing yards. That is my first bold prediction. And I thought that even before Thursday because you've got that looming. I mean, that's over Josh Jacobs' head, and now we know the better extent of it. But even before that, it just kind of felt like this was not going to be Josh Jacobs' year. Between the arrest then going back to May, the groin injury he's been dealing with, he's barely been working 11 on 11. I don't know how healthy, if he does play week 1, how healthy is he really going to be? Last year, he was already battling through injuries. He's getting close to 30 years old. We know that is a drop-off point for running backs in the NFL. He went from 1,300 or 1,400 yards and probably 1,800 total yards in year 1 to about 1,200 yards in Green Bay in year 2. It just kind of feels like we're getting to that point of Josh Jacobs' career where maybe he's going to fall off a bit. And Marshawn Lloyd, again, a limited sample size. He's much younger, quicker. He's twitchier. And he's a guy who can house it. I mean, every time he touches the ball, we talked about that with Jacobs a few weeks ago. He's never going to be a guy that busts off a 60, 70, 80-yard run. Maybe once in a great while. He's a grinder. He runs you over. He's physical. Marshawn Lloyd is more, what do we call him, the Maserati Marshawn? Marshawn Maserati. What do they call? Isn't that, what's his name, Marvin Harrison? Is that his nickname, Maserati Marv? That kind of applies to Marshawn Lloyd, too, where if he gets a seam and the blocking is good, he can take it 80 yards anytime he touches the ball. He is starting to prove in training camp and the preseason that he can stay on the field. And I just felt like even prior to Thursday, we're going to see him as the lead guy that comes in to spell Josh Jacobs. And if he continues to prove he can be healthy and he's showing you the speed and he can catch the ball out of the backfield, I just think you're going to see kind of an inverse graph. In a world where none of the legal stuff is hanging over Josh Jacobs' head, I just think the way this year is going to go is you're going to see Josh Jacobs' touches slowly decrease. Maybe an injury pops up, and I think you're going to see Marshawn Lloyd, as long as he can prove he can stay healthy, I just kind of feel like we're going to see his touches go up and more time in the backfield and more catches and more plays designed to get him in space because he is so good and so quick. So that is bold prediction number 1. I know it seems a bit disingenuous given that he could be the lead back in week 1. And if things really go sideways and they do end up releasing Josh Jacobs, then Marshawn Lloyd and Chris Brooks, I guess, are kind of your guys, and Pierre Strong, unless they make another move. Maybe they could trade for James Conner, who's also in town for the Cardinals and who also is an aging veteran on what is going to be a bad team. Maybe he wants out. Maybe they want to get rid of him. But if this Jacobs thing goes totally sideways and he's either suspended or released, I mean, Marshawn Lloyd is going to see a lot of touches. Marshawn Lloyd will lead this team in rushing yards. Bold prediction, probably boldish now. Boldish prediction number 1 for the Packers season. All right, that's all the Packers stuff, I think. Let's talk about the Milwaukee Brewers this week. We start with the extra innings loss on Tuesday. Now, that was the day, right? That was the Cooper Pratt benching, I'm pretty sure, because Hamilton ends up in the game. He's the one who throws wide of the plate in the 10th inning. Just one of those games, and I talked about this on the air on Wednesday morning, one of those games where you lose to a last-place team. You had a million chances to score runs, couldn't cash in all night. You get it to extras. In the 9th inning, they were down 2-1. Yelly hits an RBI double to tie it. You had 2 on with nobody out in the top of the 9th inning and McGill warming. At that point, I'm thinking, yeah, you're going to get a run home here. McGill shuts the door, and you find a way to escape here with a 3-2 win. They couldn't get that guy home. 2nd and 3rd, nobody out. And you go to extras, and they couldn't even move David Hamilton, their ghost runner, over. I mean, he just stayed at second base. And then in the bottom of the 10th inning, McGill was giving you 2 innings. I mean, he was sucking it up and giving you 2 innings. You had the bases loaded and 1 out. Infield was in. Ground ball directly to David Hamilton at third base. All he has to do is throw home. It's a force out. You don't even need the tag. And then that's the 2nd out of the inning. Now, you still have to get the 3rd out to get it to the top of the 11th, but you feel with the way McGill's been going, that's a pretty good chance that's going to happen. And he just absolutely sails a throw about 5 yards wide of William Contreras, and that allows the winning run to score. It is one of those games where you kind of stare off into space for 10 minutes and think, how the hell did they not win that game? They had chances all night. The Mets are terrible. You had 2nd and 3rd, nobody out in the 9th inning after you tied the game and you couldn't get a single run home. So it was frustrating. Now, why was David Hamilton in the game anyway in the 10th inning in a game that he did not start? Well, one of the biggest topics in baseball coming out of Tuesday was what Pat Murphy decided to do with 22-year-old rookie shortstop Cooper Pratt in that game. Cooper Pratt in the 5th inning, at that time the Brewers were up 1-0. He bloops a single to right field. And it falls in there, one of those kind of Bermuda Triangle type hits where 3 guys converge on it, second base, first base, right fielder. It kind of falls in between them. And then it took a weird hop away from the right fielder for a foot or two that he had to go get. And in the moment, I will admit that I thought, I wonder if Cooper Pratt's going to up at second base. They cut to the first base camera, and he's standing at first base. Immediately, Pat Murphy, he gives you that, he gets that lower jaw up there, and he gives you the bulldog look. They cut to the dugout, and in comes David Hamilton. And he's coming to get Cooper Pratt. Now, initially, I'm wondering maybe he was limping because Cooper Pratt is just coming off of the hamstring thing. So I wondered, maybe he tweaked something and that's why Hamilton's coming in. But the camera on Pratt at first base as Hamilton is jogging in kind of gives you is it 50 Cent on the GIF you see sometimes on Twitter where he goes, who, me? Who, me? Why are you taking a shot at me? He has that look on his face, Cooper Pratt does, of, wait a minute, why is David Hamilton coming out here? Why is Dave coming out here? He's coming to get me? Why is he coming to get me? So very confused. Cooper Pratt was very confused heading back to the dugout. And it was interesting when he got there, he passed Murphy immediately and didn't talk to him, which was probably a good move. And then Joey Ortiz is sitting on the bench, and he points to a seat in between Jake Bauers and Sal Frelick as they're sitting up on the rail. So Joey Ortiz is saying, go talk to the veterans. Go talk to the older players on the team. And I know Sal Frelick's not old, but talk to the veterans on the team. They're going to talk to you about why you got pulled, and then they're going to talk to you about how this is going to go. You're probably going to have a meeting with Murph after the game. So just letting a rookie like that, a high-profile rookie, letting him know what the next steps are and why this is happening. And he just looked baffled. I mean, Pratt looked absolutely mystified as to why he was taken out of that game. And I have to say, after they show the replay, I was also mystified. So once this all plays out, I'm thinking, okay, maybe he just didn't hustle out of the gate, and that's why he got pulled from the game. It didn't look like he was dogging it at all. I think he was mostly confused, like most 22-year-old dudes are. I think he was mostly confused. It was a broken bat. He couldn't find where the ball was in space. Is it a foul ball? Is it going to land in fair territory? I just don't think he knew where it was. And if you watch him run, I don't think he's pulling the plow, so to speak. I don't think he's dogging it up the first baseline. I think he's at a normal run. And I also think once you see the long view of it, even if he is sprinting, let's say he's in a dead sprint and he doesn't know where the ball is, but it doesn't matter. I'm in a dead sprint to first base. Even if he is on a dead sprint and he rounds first and tries to go to second, I don't think he makes it. I think he's out. And I think he's out by a fair margin. So in the postgame, Pat Murphy said it's not just about that, and he did think it was a lack of hustle. Murphy said in the postgame he should have been standing at second base. I don't agree, but that's what he said. And Murph also said, I haven't watched the replay, because somebody asked in the follow-up, the natural follow-up was, did you watch the replay? He said, no, I haven't looked at it yet. So as I was cutting up audio on Tuesday night, I thought, once Murphy sees this, if that's the true reason for him pulling Pratt, once Murphy watches this back, I think he might, in a place where maybe he doesn't admit it, he might say to himself, I don't know, maybe I'll eat a pocket pancake here and just settle down for a second. I don't know, maybe I was too quick on the trigger there. because I didn't really see anything. You can sometimes tell with a player when they're dogging it or they're not giving you max effort, and that is not going to fly with a lot of teams, especially a Pat Murphy team. I did not get that notion at all watching that replay. But Murphy said it wasn't just that. In the third inning, or the second inning, I think the third inning, the Brewers had runners on first and second base, nobody out, and Pratt was at the plate, and he was trying to get a bunt down, and he missed it the first time. He pulled back on a strike the second time, and ultimately did not get the runners moved over. So that played into it, too. So it wasn't just the perceived lack of hustle. It was also the inability to get a bunt down. Also, if I'm remembering correctly, the week before, Pratt also struggled to get a bunt down in a similar situation. So it might be one of those things where in the Murphy brain Rolodex, he's remembering the week before when he couldn't get a bunt down. Then on Tuesday, he can't get a bunt down, and they end up not scoring that inning. And in that moment, Murphy might be saying, son of a bitch, why can't he just get the bunt down? So then in that next situation, if you think he's not given 100%, you're already kind of agitated, right? So I think he just had a very quick trigger with what he thought was a lack of hustle on that play, but it's also a couple of other things in play. Now, Cooper Pratt in the postgame, I felt bad for him. He just was a sad 22-year-old young man. And he said, I've got to be better. It's never going to happen again. I promise it's never going to happen again. I mean, he borderline had tears in his eyes. And it is true. He was on Wednesday and on Thursday. He was sprinting everywhere. He sprinted off the bus to the stadium. He sprinted to the batter's box. He sprinted to first base. So message received, even if it was a perhaps ill-timed message, or maybe the timing wasn't the best for what was thought to be a lack of hustle, that message was received. Now, I also, as we said in the teaser, Pat Murphy, one of the best things Pat Murphy does, obviously, in his now year 3, where he has won back-to-back Manager of the Year, and I think he's going to win, I think that's never happened before, I believe he is going to win a 3rd Manager of the Year and become a 3-time Manager of the Year. So the best thing that he does is not bullpen management, it's not batting orders or anything. His thing that he does better than anybody is locker room culture. Those guys play their asses off for him, and he gets the boys going. And he gets them all unified, all rowing in the same direction. So it also would not surprise me if at the end of August, this team has been winning a ton of games, and everybody's got their eyes on these Cubs games that are coming up next week, and everybody's got their eyes on another division title and maybe a 1 seed and getting back to the NLCS and slaying the beast that is the Dodgers. You might have some of these guys, I know fans are, I know I am, you might have some of these guys that are looking forward to a month from now and the high-leverage late September games and the high-leverage October games and how are we going to get over the hump in the NLDS and the NLCS and make a run in the World Series. And maybe they're not as sharp as they normally are because you're in the dog days of summer and it's late August and you're just kind of waiting now for those bigger games toward the end of the year and the big games coming up next week in Chicago. It would not surprise me if a little bit of what happened on Tuesday is Murphy sensing that his team isn't fully sharp, isn't playing things to the nines like they normally do, and he sees a 22-year-old rookie. Like, look, I went back and forth on a text exchange with this on Wednesday's morning show. If that's Yelly, even though Yelly's been having a mess of a year, dog mess of a year, if that's Yelly in the exact same situation on Tuesday, if that's William Contreras in the exact same situation, I don't think he does what he did. But he saw a 22-year-old rookie who just got called up, who's kind of been irritating him with his inability to get bunts down. And I think he saw an opportunity to send a message, not just to him for the rest of his career, but to send a message to the rest of the team that, look, nothing has been decided yet. We haven't won the division. We haven't even clinched a playoff spot. So he maybe used that window of, I'm going to make an example out of this kid. It's fine. He's 22. Kids bounce back. Kids are Teflon. And I'm going to use this as a moment to wake this team up. And it worked. I have to say it worked. Again, I sort of disagree with the original idea of pulling him for a lack of hustle, which I did not see. But it feels like the message was received. Like even last night, Gary Sanchez got the start last night. I don't think I've seen Gary Sanchez beat out a double play all year. He beat out 2 on Thursday. So everybody was hauling ass down the line. So I feel like that message was received, and he maybe saw an avenue there to teach Cooper Pratt a lesson, but also to use like an NFL smelling salt on this team and wake them up a bit in late August. So they come back after the loss on Tuesday. They come back and dominate Wednesday's game. How about Robert Gasser on Wednesday? So Dustin May got the start. First pitch of the game, he takes a 106-mile-per-hour comebacker off of his right shoulder blade. I would be in a full body cast for 6 months if that happened. 100, I might be dead. I mean, honestly, I might be dead. 106 mile an hour off of your right shoulder blade, shattered. Bone spurs in my heart, dead. No episode 395. So he takes one off the shoulder. I actually was getting back into the house. I had the game on TV. I was out for a run, no big deal. I was on the patio trying to stop sweating. I came back in around whatever it was, 6:15, 5 minutes into the game. And I see Dustin May doubled over. And I think, what the hell happened? What could have happened? And I look in the right corner of the scorebook and I see one pitch. He threw one pitch. What could have happened in one pitch? Then I got concerned because of the way he was holding his shoulder. I immediately thought, oh my God, did he tear his shoulder? Did he tear a ligament in his elbow? Like, is this going to be a Tommy John? Is he gone? Is he out for the year? And then they started talking about the comebacker and they played the replay. And I was relieved. Like, obviously he's not feeling good, but that did not seem to me like it was going to be a season-ending injury. So he looked like he wanted to give it a go. Murphy was out there with him. It seemed to me like Murphy was telling him, look, we appreciate that you want to give this a go and toughen this out and get through as many innings as you can. It felt to me like Murphy was saying, we need you in September. We need you in October. We need you in the playoffs. So if you're going to push things right now and something worse happens, we can't afford for that to happen. So I think at that point, Dustin May conceded, okay, I'm leaving. So Robert Gasser comes into the game cold. And he was on a bullpen day, so there was the chance he was going to pitch, but he certainly was not expecting to come into the game after one pitch and one out in the first inning. He comes in and gives you 5 1/3 of 1-run ball. Everybody was talking about that postgame. Murphy, Sal Frelick, who had a 3-hit night. Everybody was talking about Big Bob Gasser coming up clutch there, coming in cold and locking in for 5 1/3. I remember when he came in the game, I kind of thought, boy, if he can give you 2 or 3 innings here, you're feeling pretty good about that. 5 1/3. And then you had the offense bust out. Terang hit a home run, 4 runs in the second inning. They dominate game to 8-1. Then last night, the Miz on the mound, and he was fighting the mound all night. So this has been an underlying subplot for Mizorowski on the road. He is taller than most pitchers. He is longer than most pitchers in his legs. And his landing spot on his plant foot as he's following through on his pitch is further down the hill than most pitchers are. Now, American Family Fields grounds crew obviously knows this very well, and they have built up that part of the mound so that he's never slipping on it. But in road games, I'm not saying anybody is putting him in a bad spot, but I think they probably care less about making sure that the opposing team starting pitcher is comfortable. That's probably a factor. And then also last night you had some rain, but it's happened in a lot of visiting stadiums where Mizorowski has not been comfortable with that landing area, and he has asked the grounds crew to come out and put some drying agent out there, put some sand out there, and firm it up. And they tried. I mean, they tried 2 or 3 times last night. He just couldn't quite get a feel for it. As a Brewer fan, watching those road starts are agonizing when he's slipping every pitch, because as we've been over, on the short list of guys you cannot lose, Jacob Mizorowski is number 1. He might be number 2 and he might be number 3. Like, if he goes down in a heap, that's it. I mean, I don't know if there's any world where this team makes a run without him. So when you're watching this guy in late August in a game that ultimately doesn't matter, and he's slipping, and you never know, hamstring, calf injury, like, he's putting a lot of torque on that leg throwing 100 miles an hour. You never know what can happen there, and I'm just, every pitch I'm holding my breath and thinking, I even texted my buddies after the 4th inning and said, just get him out of the game. I don't even care. I don't even care if you lose this game. Get him out of the game. Get him off of that mound. He does gut out 6 innings of 2-run ball. Now, for Jacob Mizorowski, by the standards he has set, expectation management, that's a letdown game. What a crap game he had last night. 6 innings of 2-run ball? Okay. 6 strikeouts? He had a little lapse in that 4th inning or the 5th inning where he gave up the 2 runs, but ultimately a great line. And last night was the Jackson Chourio game. So Jackson Chourio, no, this is another Murphy masterstroke. Jackson Chourio in Tuesday's game was 0-for-5. And I'm telling you, he had one of the worst at-bats I've seen all year in the top of the 10th inning, where they had Hamilton at second base, and we just went over. They couldn't even get him moved over. They had Hamilton, the fastest guy on the team, at second base, and nobody out, obviously, to begin that inning. And you had Chourio and Terang coming up. I mean, you were right where you wanted to be in the 10th inning. Jackson Chourio, in that at-bat on Tuesday, swung wildly at 3 pitches that were 10 feet out of the zone. When he struck out, I thought, what was that? That was so bad. You didn't even make contact. You couldn't even get him moved over. So he was really bad on Tuesday. Murphy gave him a day off on Wednesday. Just a mental reset. He comes back on Thursday. The first pitch he sees is a rocket single to right field. The second pitch he sees is a 2-run home run. And he ends up with a 4-hit night. So it was another very good instance of Murphy having a great feel for his young players. All right, he looked awful on Tuesday, really bad in that last at-bat in extra innings. Let's give him a day off, hit the reset button, blow the cartridge out here, and bring him back on Thursday. And Chourio had one of the games of his career. He had a 4-hit game. He hit a second 2-run bomb in the 8th inning, and the Brewers go on to win 8-2. Mizorowski got the win. You know, we've talked about what are the chances of the Miz getting that pitching triple crown of leading the league in wins, strikeouts, and ERA. He is still far and away the ERA leader. Strikeouts is getting a little tighter now because they're giving Miz so many days off. But that's a 14th win last night. He has now won his last 3 starts. Sanchez still leads the league with 16, but, you know, it's getting a little closer there where he's got an outside shot if he can win every start the rest of the way. He got the win, and yeah, the story was Chourio. So Chourio last night, this is one of those baseball stats I just love to read. He goes 4 for 5 last night. So last night, Jackson Chourio became just the 30th player in the history of baseball, the 30th player all time, to have, in a game, 1 stolen base, 2 or more home runs, at least 4 hits, 4 runs scored, and 4 RBIs. That only in baseball, that's a Tim Kurkjian special. That's a Tim Kurkjian wet dream right there. 30th player, where do they find this? 30th player in baseball history, 1 stolen base, 2 or more homers, at least 4 hits, 4 runs scored, and 4 driven in. An unbelievable night. The only player that did it at a younger age of those other 29 guys, at a younger age than Chourio, who is 22 and a half years old. The only player that did it at a younger age was Jimmy Fox, Hall of Famer, MVP. Jimmy Fox never quite gets the love that like a Mickey Mantle got or Babe Ruth or Ted Williams back in his era, or even Ty Cobb, guys like that. That's the era he was in. He was a massive power hitter for the Philadelphia Athletics. You just don't hear his name. There is some thought that Jimmy Dugan in the movie A League of Their Own is loosely based on Jimmy Fox because both were alcoholics. So that's the only player in the history of the game that accomplished what Chourio accomplished last night at a younger age. I talked about this on the B93 Morning Show when we did Brewer Trivia. It almost kind of feels to me like we kind of lose sight of how good Jackson Chourio is, and he's been a little up and down this year. When he's hot, like last night, he puts together video game numbers. When he's cold, like Tuesday, he can be very cold. And he was red hot in the month of June, almost won player of the month, terrible in the month of July. Now he's been really good in the month of August for the most part. So he's been a little up, down, up, down. But there has been so much talk about The Miz and Cooper Pratt and Luis Lara getting called up. Got it. And all the other great prospects they have. Jesus Madej is the number 1 prospect in baseball. Andrew Fisher hit 41 home runs in the minor leagues this year. So it almost feels like Chourio, even though he's only in his 3rd year, it kind of feels like he's this grizzled veteran. Like we forget he's not even 23, you know? It was 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago where he signed that contract for $81 million, the richest contract for any player that had not played an inning of Major League Baseball. And he got called up at 19 years old or right at 20 years old. It sort of feels like we almost lose sight of how good he is because you've got all these other things that are going on. So with the win on Thursday, the Brewers are 83-51. Cubs lost back-to-back games in Arizona after winning on Tuesday. So right now, the Brewers have a 7-game lead on the Cubs and the tiebreaker at the moment. They have the season series 4-2. And the Brewers, after the Dodgers get swept by the Braves last night, Chris Sale, what a performance. Complete game shutout in a 1-0 win, and he beat Yamamoto last night. So the Braves sweep the Dodgers. So right now in the NL, you've got the Brewers at 83-51, 3 games up on the Dodgers, 4 games up on the Braves, 7 games up on the Cubs, 9 games up on the Phillies. So you've got a little breathing room right now for the 1 seed too. Not saying it's locked up, but more breathing room than you've had for that spot in a while. So back at it tonight. Now you've got a Texas Rangers team in town. The AL West is such a dumpster fire. You've got in the AL West right now, the Houston Astros are in first place. They are 500. The Texas Rangers are a game out at 66-68. So you've got a sub-500 team coming to AmFam, but they're a game out of winning a division and getting a playoff spot. And I'm sure they feel like, look, just get us in the dance and let's see what happens. They just won the World Series, 2 years ago? So it is Brewers and Rangers tonight. What are the pitching matchups? It is a 6:40 first pitch country music night tonight. Cole Swindell, post-game concert. 6:40 tonight, Logan Henderson on the hill. Shane Drowan goes Saturday. And right now, Gasser is scheduled for Sunday. That's going to change now because of the spot duty he had to come into after Dustin May. Now, maybe Dustin May said on Thursday that he's actually feeling really good. If he stays on his normal program, I would think Dustin May then starts on Sunday. But you've got this kind of random home series, interleague series with the Rangers, and then when we record on Monday, we've got game 1 of a 4-game set at Wrigley. Now, right now, you're feeling pretty good. Now, we'll see what happens this weekend. The Cubs have the Reds at Wrigley this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sundays, and the Reds have been faltering. So we'll see what the division lead is when we record this podcast on Monday. But if you've got a 6 or 7 game lead on Monday, you've got 4 at Wrigley, then the Brewers go to Cincinnati next weekend, and then on Labor Day Monday, the Cubs are in town starting a 3-game set at AmFam. So 7 games left with the Cubs, and right now you have a 7-game lead. A lot can happen. There are a lot of games left. I think in 2018, around Labor Day weekend, the Brewers were 5 or 6 games back, and we all know how that year ended. They got hotter than all get out. They get to game 163, they take the division. So nothing is decided yet. But in 7 games remaining against the Cubs, if you have a 6 or 7 game lead heading into Monday, even if you go 2-5, which I don't think they're going to, even if you went 2-5 in those 7 games, that still only makes up 3 games. So that takes you from, 6 to 3 games or 7 down to 4 games. And at that point, you've only got 20 games left. So again, nothing is done until it's done. But with a 7-game lead right now, if you go 3-4 or 4-3 in those 7 games, I would say the division at that point is most likely a wrap. But we'll see what happens one day at a time, right? 6:40 first pitch tonight, Logan Henderson on the hill. I think that's everything that I've got for you here.
This is the way we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
Just one more time. All right, that'll do it for us here on your Friday. We will get back after it on Monday. We will have bold prediction number 2 for the Packers season. We'll recap Packers-Cardinals from Friday, and we'll get set for Brewers and Cubs. Big one getting underway on Monday at Wrigley Field. Have a happy, safe weekend. We'll chat with you then.